Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of The Critics. This is the 16th edition, and the topic of this specific podcast or webinar is Finding Your Employee's True Potential, the Quest for a Human Life. My name is Vinay Raman, and I am the CEO of Carmo. Carmo is an effectiveness company, not efficiency. I've often found that people want to do more of the same thing, regardless of how flawed the process is. We help companies do better. And to help me show you how you can do better, I've put together a panel of some fantastic industry minds that I've pretty much met all through LinkedIn. Some fantastic people. And I think you're going to learn a lot from them, hopefully throughout the course of this conversation. But first, this conversation doesn't work so well if we're just talking to ourselves the whole time, because there's a lot of knowledge on the call here. There's a lot of experience and lots of nuggets of wisdom that you'll get throughout the course of this. And the only way that you'll get some real value out of this is by participating in the discussion. So I would like to ask you in the comments, maybe on the right-hand side of your screen here, you can put in the comments, tell me who you are and where you're connecting in from. We've got people who connect from all over the globe. I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina, in the United States on the East Coast, but we've had people from all over the globe, as far as over into Asia and to Europe, just all over the place that have connected in. So please type into the comments. Let us know where you're connecting from, city, state, and country. With that said, I'd like to introduce you to my panel, the panel of experts that I've brought here and been able to get some time with today. First, I want to start with Dean. Dean, how are you doing today?
Great. It's great to be with everyone.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because Dean is someone that I've talked to a couple of times now. He fundamentally understands people, and I think I'll let him tell you a little more about that as he sees fit. But he works with a technology called Culture Index, and I'll let him tell you more about it. But he's an entrepreneur, an accomplished sales professional, and has been a business advisor to numerous high-growth companies. He's an executive advisor for companies using the Culture Index system, which is about applied analytics and predicting the behavioral outputs of individuals. Dean, did I say that in a good enough way?
Yeah, you nailed it. Thanks, Vinay.
Next, I'd like to introduce you to Rich. Rich and I met at a conference probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. It was at an automotive dealership conference, and you just meet some people that you have a conversation with them after a few minutes. You're like, I like these are good people. And Rich, I think for me that seemed to stick out very quickly. You and I just seemed to sync pretty quickly. Is that a fair way to say that? I got you on camera now.
No, that's a very, very fair way of saying it. We were finishing each other's sentences, which doesn't happen very often on a first meeting.
Yeah, I agree. So Rich is the founder of Dignity Leadership Consulting, a consulting firm that helps individuals, teams, and organizations build and improve their culture by developing core leadership skills. Let me kind of share a little bit of a personal experience. I'll tell you, in all the companies that I've run, I'm on company number 6. I often found that the biggest impediment to my own success or the company's success was not all the people that I had working for me. It was actually me. And once I started to upgrade my game, the company's game started to go up as well. And that's what Rich focuses on. Rich, did I say that? Did I do some justice there?
You did better than I could do on my own. I appreciate it. You hit it spot on.
Good. And last one is, and last but not least, is Khaled Gorab. Khaled and I met online. I've been following Khaled for some time and I just love the language that he uses in speaking about companies and cultures and how they grow. He's an award-winning startups coach and strategic advisor and founder of the Irtika. Did I pronounce it? Irtika, right? International Consulting. Author of The Art of Winning People Over, led businesses in AI, technology. That's when you started to catch the entrepreneurial bug. So you started a couple of different companies. Khaled loves this idea of business and what's happening in business and the culture and the feeling and the emotion that goes behind it, and marrying all those things together to get to a good, well, let me share a story. I feel like I always have lots of emotions, lots of thoughts, lots of ideas. and how I put that all together so I kind of become that laser beam of light as opposed to just this unfocused light was difficult for me. So that's what I really enjoyed about Khaled. He shows you how to bring that together. How did I do there, Khaled?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I like it. I like it.
Well, Khaled, since I ended with you, I'd like to start with you and start opening up some questions for you, right?
Sure.
Our topic today is this idea of finding employees' true potential and the quest for a human life. I feel like to some degree that title is kind of at odds with itself, right? The true potential and this quest for human life. Talk to me about that. What does that mean to you in terms of, can those two things exist? When people talk about work-life balance, what are your thoughts?
Oh man, that's like 3 questions in one, but I can tell you something. In my 13 years of working with executives, founders, and CEOs, I find that one of the key issues they face, they hire experts, they don't get out of them their best. And they say the reason for this is, Khaled, we want to brainwash the bad out of them. So they're usually coming from a different environment and they're not compatible with the new environment. And so somebody like me comes in, meets them where they're at, and brings out their true potential, right? So that's what it means to me and that's what it was attractive about the topic for me. It's like, how can we help people do that?
Thank you for that. We have Richard Scales. Hey, Richard, from Richmond, Virginia. Thank you, Richard, for joining. We've got Janine from the Philippines, Jawad from Pakistan, Ebi from Nigeria, and Paul from the Philippines. Thank you all for coming. I would love to hear, as you're going through this, if there's particular things that you hear throughout the course of this conversation that sort of resonate or kind of stick in your mind. I'm always thinking in terms of take-home stories or nuggets of wisdom. Rich, I'll go to you next. You heard a little bit of what Khaled said. How about yourself? Do those two things kind of align for you? Or are they just two different topics altogether?
I think in the world, we try to separate them. But in reality, we live one life. We don't live, a lot of people want to say, well, I live a work life, I live a home life, I live a R&R life, whatever it is. But in reality, we've got to have balance. We've got to figure out how to get that balance. And one thing I've learned recently on reading some more books, I seem to never stop reading. I figure it's a great way to continue to learn and grow. But it's talking about having this balance instead of trying to find less of something, like maybe less work or less homework or less stress, is changing your mindset to having more. So having more production, more rewards, more relaxation. And when you start working on a system of abundance, you kind of have that mindset shift and you get out of the negative into the positive. And I've been working on that myself. Instead of saying, hey, what can I do to reduce my stress? It's like, what can I do to relax or enjoy life more? And I've started to find a bigger balance by having that mind shift, which I think ties into this topic. It's like, well, I need to work less. No, you need to relax more. Or maybe you're relaxing too much and you're not getting your goals. Maybe you need to work more, but finding that balance by adding, not subtracting.
Interesting. I like that sort of, you're talking about some shifts in sort of language there and sort of mindset. I'm curious, Richard, Janine, Jawad, Ebi, or Paul, how does that resonate with you? Have you ever thought about sort of that shift in mindset? Have you ever wondered how to do it? I'm kind of curious. Please type that into the comments. Dean, I want to come to you. You take a look at behavioral analytics that show us a little bit more about sort of, and peels back the layers of the onion for individuals in what you do. Tell me what you hear when you hear about this idea of employees and their true potential and that quest for that human life and kind of that duality that I think Rich was talking about.
Right. I think the two biggest things that influence that, one is shocking, especially for young workers, not understanding like how they're wired and what type of roles they truly fit in. And a great example is oftentimes, how many people do you know go to college and get a degree or go into college and have no idea what they're going to do, but they're like, well, I hear computer science pays a lot, I'll go get a degree in that. Happen to be intelligent doesn't necessarily mean that they're wired to be a tech guy. You know what I mean? And I see it time and time again in different companies, especially, like I said, with young workers coming into organizations that maybe have the degree, but don't necessarily have the traits. And so being able to figure out kind of where you fit within the workplace, I think is absolutely critical very early on. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Culture Index through another organization that actually identified my traits and told me what I'd be very good at, and was super fortunate to have them right. So for me, it is something where you have to learn kind of how you're wired, how those traits map to different types of roles. And then once you get into those type of roles, the other component of it is also, to me, being able to have leadership that understands how to maximize your potential or how to best utilize you, So, and that's the key. If you can get someone in the right role and then have a leader that understands how to cultivate your talents and put you in what we call the right seat, right spot, or what I often call the zone of genius, I think that's absolutely critical. So, and if you think about it, that's a challenge, one, for the individual first figuring out, and two, having the right leadership that understands that leadership in general isn't one size fits all, right? So every individual is wired a different way. They have different environments that they need. They have different motivators. They have different ways that you need to communicate with them. And too often I see, especially with young leaders, they adopt a one size fits all rather than tailoring their approach to each individual, each individual's unique characteristics. So that's how I see it, kind of as the two part.
Well, so this is really interesting because some of the things that are coming here in the comments, what I'm hearing from you, Dean, and kind of all of you, is just this idea that there is no duality in who we are. There's not two sides of us. There's always just one. But that one is, instead of, and I think kind of borrowing a little bit from what Rich was saying, is if we can start asking better questions of ourselves as opposed to just kind of repeating the same narrative over and over again, that allows us to maybe answer, Khaled, to some of what you're saying. Those three different questions out there, it all kind of just starts to harmonize into who we actually are. And if we can start as leaders to understand who we are individually, but also all the people on our teams, that's when we start to talk about rocket fuel in terms of moving forward. Did I hear that right?
Yep, very much so. Yeah, I always say, one of the biggest mistakes I see in organizations is too often they hone in on what people are not good at and say we need to help them improve. And usually what I say is, no, what you need to do is stop making people do what they suck at. Focus in on what they are good at and complement them with other individuals who make up for their shortcomings. And that's why we have teams.
So I get a couple of comments that came in here from Richard Scale. Spot on. More is always available, but you have to always ask the right questions. Jawad says, by asking the right questions and doing the needs analysis, I think you get to a better outcome. Joshua Kimball, I want to share what he's saying here, because I think there's something worth reading here. It says, unfortunately, in Arizona, employees are just coaching each other to scream at their employees until they get what they want. I'm currently about to hire an employee to work a route at my company. I have the chance to try a different path. I'm curious, comments from you all, because I'd like to show maybe how we can take some active situations and how we can change our response to them. Any responses to what Joshua has written here?
I think this is the typical, we want people to be type A. Like type A is glorified in organizations. And if you're not type A, you're not a high achiever, right? So people normally consider type A are right at the top of the hierarchy. Type B would be just down there because they comply to type A, right? So I believe he's right. And I commend him for his courage to say, I'm going to try something different. It takes a lot of guts. So good luck, Joshua. It's going to be amazing.
Rich, were you going to say something?
No, I'm in total agreement with that. It seems like kind of using Dean's analogy and tying into this question, let's say you're assembling a track team, right? And if you're getting ready to run a shuttle relay, but you put all 100-meter sprinters on there, you're probably not going to win. You can't have all sprinters on your shuttle hurdle relay. It's just not going to work. So you got to find a balance, and you got to see, look at your organization, assess your needs, find what you are. And I think you hit it earlier, Vinay, on improving yourself. What are you as a leader weak at? Identify that's self-awareness, and then go fill that gap with whoever you're hiring to bolster up your team. And now you start to have that well-rounded balance where you don't feel like you're riding down the road, just on a flat tire.
Yeah.
Can I add something there, Vinay?
Please.
Rich, I like what you're saying. And I also believe that a lot of organizations do not understand or recognize that change is very contextual, extremely contextual. So if I'm trying to make everybody look the same, it means I'm trying too hard to control the context of things. What I love about what you said is if I can get everybody to create some kind of balance. What I don't understand in your comment, maybe you could clarify that, is what you mean by balance. Because it's a very nebulous term to me. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, when I'm talking balance, so I can't remember the exact comment, but you're trying to get everybody to do, I think it was kind of like yelling at or demanding people do what you want. Well, people have different talents and you got to go figure it out. So, look at your organization, we're looking for balance. You need people that are steady, in behavior. You need people that are get things done in behavior. You need the inspirational people. You need all those different types to have balance. So if your organization comes out and you've got all, I think you said type A, you have all type A's on your team, that's not balance. You need to have balance, and then you got to have critical thinking to understand, okay, what does Colette, what does Dean, what does Vinay know that I don't, that I can learn, that can balance us out to make this more effective versus my way is the right way or my way is the highway.
Yeah. So I appreciate Joshua for yourself and Jawad and Richard and everyone else. We got Shuva from watching in from Bangladesh. We've got Fourth. Hey, Fourth, thanks for connecting in from Southern Pines. And Paul says, I agree with Dean. One can learn things, but it's a different story when you're tailored to where you are best. I'd like to make a little bit of a transition here because I will tell you about myself. I'm very much in terms of self-awareness. I'm very much a visual kind of guy. You draw a picture for me and I get it in an instant, but you can write every single physics equation on the board. It just doesn't, I'm just the slowest. I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. True story, because when I was in physics class in 12th grade, they talked about, elastic and inelastic collisions, crashing the billiard balls and the carts and stuff like that into each other. But it wasn't until I actually went to the physics lab where I saw those two things together and I saw the billiard balls running into each other and sort of the action, the reaction. I was like, oh, the light bulb went on for me. What I'm trying to do is say, I want to set the stage for where we're going to go next year. And that is, we can talk about all these things and how you can respond to it as a leader and see these situations as a leader. But I'd like to show you what we build as a company called empathy graphs. These empathy graphs draw data in from companies so you can actually see what I call the behavioral fingerprint of each individual in their operation for that role. And I think to the panel here, I'd love to hear what you all see and how you all will react to that as leaders in terms of responding to the situation based on how each individual differs. So I'm going to share my screen here and let's see if we can get this to work. Can you all see my screen? Super.
Yeah.
One thing before I go forward is I'd love to hear from anybody in the audience if there are any nuggets that you heard from Dean, Khaled, or Rich so far that resonated with you. Just as far as recaps, I'd love to be able to capture some of these comments. So if you heard something, please type it into the comments. I'd really love to hear, and I think everyone else would love to hear too what you captured. They may not have gotten the same. All right, so I want to introduce you to this what we call the empathy graph. And we're looking at data that came in from a company real time. We take all this data and we build it into this picture here. And let me walk you through this. Up at the top here, we're talking about a person named Aaron who works in a particular role. This happens to be a pest control company. And this is a technician who goes out and services in the field. So a remote employee, they're out in a vehicle all the time, out servicing customers. The average person in this role has got a 50 out of 100. 100 is an A+, and a 1 or a 0 is you're having a really, really difficult time performing in that role. And we don't really talk so much about good or bad, so much as effectiveness, how effective. So somebody at 100 is very effective in that role. Aaron has got a 61 out of 100, more effective than the average person in that same role. And there's 39 people in this particular role for this company. We've changed the names. But if you look at this graph here, it gives you a quick sense of who this person is. Now, the way I look at this graph is you want those blue dots all the way out to the ends, because if this blue dot was right here, at the far edge, that would mean they're highly effective in their driver behavior because they're using a GPS unit to measure their driving behavior. Efficiency is how they're doing as a technician in their role. Again, this can apply to any type of role in any type of industry, as long as they use software. Their employee experience, their customer service score, or their customer rating, and their net promoter score. How aligned they are in a qualitative assessment with alignment of priorities with their leadership team, their self-assessment on skills, and tech referring. That's what this company happened to call it. Tech referring can also be called as inside sales. So they're going out to visit customers and they're saying, hey, Miss Jones, Mr. Jones, we just finished a job. I noticed that you've got some other problem here. Is that something interesting? Is that something we can help you with as well? Inside sales. If you look at this, you see blue is Aaron. That's how Aaron is operating. And you can see this dark gray. That dark gray is the average employee. So you can see there's certain areas where Aaron, in this case, is more effective than the average. You can see some places where they're very close to average. You can see some areas that they are significantly less effective than the average. First of all, I'd love to see from the audience, was this clear in terms of what this is showing? There's more on the screen that I'd like to describe to you, but I'd like to see if that was clear to you and you get a sense of who this employee is. Specifically, I'd like to ask you, do you see this as an A, B, C, D, or an F employee? I'm kind of curious. Just type into the comments what letter, A, B, C, D, or F employee. I'm kind of curious what everyone comes up with. But to the panel, what do you all think? When you see this, who wants to go first? What do you see when you see something like this?
I can go.
Go for it. Go for it.
You're up, please. I mean, the big thing for me is, again, understanding, especially, is how important is that, like, tech referring and the continuation of sales. Because here's the thing, a lot of very analytical type people, especially if they're in a technical type role, they tend to, if you look at their social trait, because they are more analytical, it doesn't necessarily make it easy for them to sell. So the only way, obviously one of the things you could try to do as an organization, if that is a critical component of your organization, it's to hire the type of individuals that have a higher social trait. In other words, it's very easy for them to go out and generate repeat business. But if this individual is effective in all the other facets of that role, but weak in that, can you essentially create the system and process as a leader within that organization to make it easy for them essentially to follow a script? Because if they don't have that script, it's always going to be very difficult for them, to improve. So one, again, it's looking at the front end. If this individual hiring more people that have higher social, so it's easy for them to naturally do that, but also as a leader, creating, the system process, SOPs, and stuff like that for an individual who may not be that great at it to follow, because it's difficult for them naturally to do that.
So Richard Scale says, crystal clear. This is a B. Khaled, you were about to say something. What do you see? Give me a sense of what you think. You'll give a letter grade to this person, and tell me what you were going to say.
I actually align with Richard Scales. I see him as a B, could potentially turn into an A. What I love about this profile is it really tells me that this guy is excellent for retaining customers. He's excellent at that. The priority alignment, what I understood is maybe I could help this guy refresh his idea of what his vision is being part of the company, what our vision is, and align him on where we're headed, so that eventually he could bring in more of his character. Second, I also looked at the chart on the right. His highest scores in the NPS, Net Promoter Score, and his lowest score is in the priority alignment. Mm-hmm. That's right. Just my eyes went there. That tells me something. All I have to do is vision, purpose with this guy, and let him run wild with the relationships that he's great at. If he's not about sales, fine, no problem. But this is what I would do. I like this guy.
Yeah. So Ebby says slightly above average, so he's a B. I'd love to hear from everyone else what they give as a score. Rich, I want to come to you because Dean is saying look, we have people who've got certain propensities and certain kind of their own human traits that they bring to the table here. Khaled says, you can take a look at this. I like this guy, but there's some opportunity here. Rich, what are you seeing?
I see a lot of information, and for me, it boils down to how is the organization using the data in terms of leading this employee?
Mhm.
So how are you collecting that information, and then what is the purpose? Does it align with your values? Does it align with where you want to go in the organization? And you mentioned earlier that this is a pest control. And so one of the things that comes out is they're all in vehicles, they're all driving. You need to have good driver behavior. So that's something that everybody on the team needs to have in common. So if this guy was off the charts and everything else, but he was a terrible driver, he'd probably be a disaster for your team. But now that because he's a good driver, he can already do a lot of things that a bad driver can't. He can get to the place, he can start accomplish things. So I think using what Khalid says is you build up on those opportunities. And then with the net promoter score, I always scratch my head on that, because that one really comes down to how is that net promoter score being collected? Is Aaron responsible for giving a survey at the end of his service? Is he a really good smooth talker and gets it? And maybe the next guy's not a smooth talker and he doesn't get a deal? I mean, is there an incentive? Do you get a free treatment if you fill out the NPS? So it comes back to basically the value system again on how you collect that data. But overall, I'm hearing a lot of Bs. I think I'm looking at this guy's probably an A in my book, and for different reasons. And it's probably because he's not a bad employee. He's not a cancer. And I probably wouldn't say A, B, C, D, or F in my book. I'd go more along, this guy's really great and I'd love to keep him on my team, or, this person's hurting the culture and they need to go. And that's kind of how I divide them.
I want to build on that a little bit, and I'll bottom line it. The reason I gave this guy a B and potentially an A, because I think he could do so much more than his position. So I'll put this guy on social media. If I was the business owner, I'll put him on social media. I would let him document how he delights people. I would let him maybe be one of the podcast hosts or something. Like, this guy's so good with people. He's going to make my company shine. And I think that's why I would say A.
So I think, and I want to say that, look, there's lots of room for interpretation here, right? Because we're kind of doing this in somewhat of a vacuum, right? There's so much context could be here. Thinking about Joshua in terms of what he was saying earlier about people just sort of screaming at each other, and there's this opportunity to try a different path. I think what I'm seeing from all of you is that there is a narrative, and what we've heard from Janine. She says, I agree with Khaled, B, but has a potential to be an A. Right. As we're seeing all these different things, people, I think, are coming to a somewhat of a consensus of understanding of what this person is, that this person is actually probably pretty good for this culture. But I think we've just humanized this person right now by seeing that. And we see where this person's innate strengths and value to the organization is. And I think there's some real value. I want to spend one moment covering just a little bit more that I didn't touch on. Just before we started the show, Khaled actually just asked this. He said this overall top 5 techs, right? So we've got Chance with an 89, Sarah with a 73, Eric 68. So this overall score for Aaron is a 61, right? I would suspect that he is right number 6 on this list here, because these are the top performers of overall performance in this company. He is right in the thick of it right there. So this person is a high performer. But look at this now. He now has this opportunity to go reach out to Chance or Sarah, to Eric, and say, hey, look, here's some places on the tech referring side I'd like to do a little bit better. How do I? And that it gives Aaron the opportunity to ask that question, because Aaron in this case would know. On the right-hand side, we've got specific scores for each one of these dimensions. So we see that priority alignment is a 49. Tech referring is a 27, as we can kind of see here. But we see driver behavior is an 87. NPS is an 89. Highly effective in some areas, less effective in others. I think what's emerging to me, or I'm hearing you all talk in some of the comments, is a story is emerging. A story about Aaron, uniquely tailored to Aaron, is emerging. I'd like to ask the audience who's listening, who's listening in, watching in, do you see that story as well? And do you feel like you've got without ever meeting Aaron, do you feel like you have a sense of who Aaron is and what they can do? Because while you're typing your comments, and I'd like to give you a snapshot into someone else, and I'd love to open up the panel, get you all to say, tell me what you think. So we've got Aaron here with the 61 out of 100. Now we're looking at Nathan with a 43. Different person. Panel, Dean, Khaled, Rich, what do you all see in the audience? I'd love to hear from you all as well in the comments.
Well, I'm celebrating Nathan's skills assessment score. My interpretation is this guy likes to be left alone. He needs to focus on a certain task. Let him be. He's good at something, and he may not be the best at interacting with others all the time, but he's efficient. You give him a task, he's going to get it done. So my curiosity is going, well, how can I utilize this guy better in this company?
Yeah. Rich, Dean, how you're the leader for this company. You see this graph. We saw, the last person in this role. We saw Nathan now. We saw how Aaron looks. How do you respond to this as the leader of this company that has this information in front of you?
I think we sit down with Nathan, and if you're doing this on a regular basis, you have one-to-one conversations with your team, and you ask them questions. How can I help you? Is there something I'm doing to get in your way? Is there something I can be doing different? Is there a teammate that can help you? Roadblocks, remove the obstacles that might be in the way. But I think a lot of this comes down to behaviors. And maybe it's me as a leader, and I need to change my communication style with this individual to meet Nathan where Nathan lives, rather than trying to put Nathan in the basket where maybe the rest of the techs are.
So that's funny you say that. An example I've used internally within my company, and I've used with others, is, I've been told you've got to say something 7 times before someone can say it. And the way I've always thought of it is, I don't want to say it 7 times. I want to say it the right time, the first time, the right way, so that people understand it. The conversation that I would have with Aaron and the conversation that I would have with Nathan are 2 different types of conversations, not because Nathan or Aaron are good per se, so much as they see the world through a different set of lenses. So I'd like to be highly effective in the way I communicate with them, just as opposed to just repeating it. Dean, Khaled, I'm curious what's going through your minds.
One of the things that I try to do too is when you sit down and look at someone like this, is you have to ask the question too: are they really in the right seat? And that's why I think it's good to have data across the organization, because oftentimes when you have someone who maybe really is good in a certain area, but not good in some of the really important areas for this role, this is what he's really good at, better utilized somewhere else. I can't tell you how many times like that has saved people within organizations who the leadership thought was an underperformer. Well, you just had him in the wrong seat. But the question is, okay, are they on the right bus? Yes, his behaviors indicate that he is a cultural fit. He's a hard worker, but he's just not wired to do this role really well. So when you extrapolate data like this, not only for this type of role, but other roles, and say, okay, well, the traits and the skills that he's showing here, where he is really good, actually is a way better fit over here. Why don't we shift him to another role in the organization that better fits, who he is, and help him get his zone of genius? Because the worst thing in the world is to be like in a role, where you try, but you're just not necessarily wired to do it really well. And the impact that has on the individual's like mental health, the individual's like performance, the individual's impact on those around him, it's just not healthy. So when I see someone who is lower, that has some things that he's good at, like that's one of the first things that I look to do. And like I said, I've worked in organizations where we've made a shift and that individual's absolutely flourished. So in this case, I think that might be something, rather than just with some of the scores in some of those key areas, saying we have to find a way to push them up. To me, again, don't make someone do what they suck at necessarily. Find a place where they can thrive. rather than fitting that square peg in the round hole, right?
Khaled, I want to hear your comments in just a moment here. I want to read a couple of comments that have been coming in from the audience. Richard says, I find it amazing how a well-crafted test can humanize and bring clarity. I agree, Richard. That is true, right? Being able to see these stories of the individuals I think is powerful. Jawad says, even I am not good at it. I can visualize the whole story. You can see these people. Richard says, again, my comment on an individual internal language applies here. I agree. And that comment was, people have different internal languages that a good leader identifies and speaks to them in that language. I think right on. So the story has emerged here, and I think I'm hearing a little bit from you, Dean, that what if this person great at their conscientious and their driver behavior, they're highly efficient, they've got high degree of skills assessment. What if perhaps being a trainer is actually the best place for them because they're highly technical, they get it, they understand how it all fits together. Interacting with people is just not their cup of tea, and there's nothing wrong about it. That's just who it is. Khaled, I'd like to leave it to you. Give some comments, though.
Well, Vinay, could you just tell us quickly a bit of the context of Nathan? Where is he in the organization? Is he new? Is he?
So that's a fantastic question. I actually don't have that data here. We've kind of purposely pulled that out just to give it open-ended. It's a good question, though, right? I mean, if this is a person who has been on board for 6 weeks, that tells one story as opposed to someone who's been with the company for 6 years. I mean, if this person is a senior technician in the company, one of the most senior techs in the company is operating like this, I tell you, this person's waiting for that offer letter to come in. They're about to leave, right? So I think the answer to your question is give me a context that you want to evaluate under, and let's try it that way.
Yeah, I think, and you know what? Looking at him, something tells me he's maybe in his comfort zone. Look at, like, he's shining in these areas, but if by any measure of his context he's in his comfort zone, I would really develop this guy by challenging him a little bit, by maybe feeding him some procedures that he would follow, and maybe team him up with somebody who is up there that can be an inspiration or a role model to him. That's what I'd see.
So let me. So this brings up an interesting thought. I mean, look, I know I've worked in companies where when I started in the role, there was a job description that was given to me, and 2 years later, they used the same job description, but the role had changed. Right? What if this person, when they started with the company 5 years ago, this guy was knocking it out of the park every single day of the week, and the company grew. They were 5. He joined when they were 5 employees. They're now at 114. What is expected of them is different. Tech referring didn't happen because they grew by referral back then. Now tech referring is something that they ask everyone at every single team meeting. We got to grow. What if the role has changed? The person hasn't, but the role has. Thoughts? I'd love to hear from the audience what you're seeing, if you can kind of see that sort of picture, if you've been through that situation yourself where the role has changed on you. Panel?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I see it all the time in organizations that are scaling, right? Oftentimes, the team that gets you to one gate's not necessarily the same team that can get you through the next. So, and like as an organization, that's why you have to be really good at assessing your people and the traits that they had. And like you said, there are often times where the organization outgrows individuals. So, and if that's the case, you know, the right thing truly to do is to help that individual either, you know, again, find some other place in the organization where he may be a better fit, or truthfully help him get back into an organization that's maybe more early stage, like you said in this case, where he is more, you know, he is the type of individual who's better suited to a fast moving kind of chaotic environment rather than one that has a lot of system structure that you have to comply with, which
Yes.
Which happens all the time as well. So
I love that, Dean, and I would couple with it the idea that we need to help this person with his internal operating system, meaning if the environment has changed, the complexity of that environment will affect this person's ability to produce a certain level of output. I cannot expect, if I'm talking like, for example, a startup founder who's getting funded, the startup founder getting $1 million check is a completely different startup founder who's getting $10 million, even though it's the same person. So if I'm getting somebody like Nathan, after some time, 5 years in, and I expect him to produce a certain level of output, and he's not. Even if I change his place in the organization, something here has not shifted. And I'm talking strictly from a coaching perspective. I need to work on this guy's internal world, what it means to be in this new environment.
Yeah. And I mean, I use myself as an example. I'm what you call trailblazer. I'm highly autonomous. I need to be in control of my own destiny. I absolutely hate rules more than anything in the world. So I am great in a startup environment that has a lot of chaos, that lets me be free to make decisions free of rules and structure. And when an organization begins to scale and system, structure, process come into it, it's time for me to go start something new.
Yep.
I want to switch to one third slide here just to show us something else. But before I do that, I want to bring light to something. I don't know that this word has been used specifically, but all these areas where Nathan is struggling here, where he's not as effective as others, let me tell you, that is probably manifested as frustration for Nathan, right?
Mhm.
He's showing up at those meetings every week, those team meetings, going, God, I keep getting dinged. I'm at the bottom of the list every week on Tech Reform. I'm at the bottom of the list for my Net Promoter Score. And he knows what his employee experience is. And that narrative is just kind of self-propagating. And it is a challenge, because I'll tell you, my father was an operator for a company. He used to run an organization with 450 people, and he liked getting up every morning and making the donuts kind of thing. I mean, he actually ran a natural gas company, but step 1, step 2, step 3, repeat, and he loved that and kind of bringing everything back. I'm a daredevil, Dean. You know what that means.
Right.
I'm all gas. There's no break for me, and you trying to get me to do the same process and over again, I'll tell you, you may as well try to have an ice cold tea on the face of hell. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. Third person here, I want to spend a couple of minutes looking at this, and then I want to kind of bring it back to the panel for some comments. I do want to say, Prim said, with this data, I understand why Rich Levine said it's key to prioritize balance over one single stereotype. Jawad says maybe an employee is in his field, but he is an operations person. I think kind of just to your point of what I just said. And Jawad also said you can better determine who fits where. I agree with all of that. I think these are all the points where I'll collectively circling around. Who wants to go first on this one? Anyone want to take a hack at what's going on here? Jairus, different employee.
Well, for me, the biggest thing I see is it's a highly efficient employee that probably is not maximizing his potential, or someone isn't pushing him. It's good. He's pretty well rounded, and that it seems like he has the capability to do most of what the job requires. He's just doing it slightly below average. So to me, this is the type of employee that maybe he has been around for a while and he's just gotten really comfortable, in the role, and he just needs something to push him a little bit more, and again, a leader to create a better incentive structure to again focus on setting different types of goals, incentives, something to get him to push it back out a little bit. And I mean, we see that oftentimes, someone who has all the right traits, but their behaviors indicate that they're not fully engaged, and I think we see that a lot in today's day and age with the Great Resignation, with the silent quitting, individuals who at best are giving you 4 to 5 good hours of work when they fully have the capability to be a top performer. Now, the question is, as a leader, it's like, what can we do with this type of individual to get him to push back out and maximize his true potential again?
So I want to kind of just make a quick one more note here, and that is that this white space, this light gray area, I think of that as all the opportunity to be realized. And that the way we derive that is from someone else in the organization is actually operating at that level. Somebody has achieved this level before. Somebody else has achieved this level before. So Jairus, in this case, has this opportunity, the opportunity to kind of potentially realize and unlock here is this blue being from out here, just below average, all the way out to here. It's possible. It's been done in the organization, right? It's the opportunity, and is that, I think, to some degree, the ownership of that leader to unlock that capability. I'd be curious in the audience, how long did it take you to see that? Because you may or may not have been in the pest control industry, but you're probably seeing and getting a sense of that human that is in this role pretty quickly. Have you been able to see that much visibility into your people that quickly in the past before? I'd love to hear in the comments, and thank you all for all the comments. Rich, I don't feel like I've heard from you in a little bit. What do you think? What's going on in your mind?
I don't think I would mess with this guy. So my interpretation is this guy is an extremely reliable, consistent employee that shows up every day on time and does the job efficiently. In his mind, he is probably all the way out past to the end of the gray. He probably doesn't want to be promoted. He's probably happy with what he's doing, and he's just content. And we are all making an assumption here, and this is what I'm hearing, is that he needs to improve. He might be, put the brakes on it. I am happy. I'm paying my bills. I got food on my table. I got a bed to sleep in. I got clean clothes. Why are you messing with me? Now, I think when we go back to the other guy that was looking where you're thinking like getting all the dings and stuff, yeah, he's probably frustrated. I'm thinking this guy is your steady, consistent dude. And he's just like, hey, as long as my paycheck is there and you keep treating me well, I'm going to show up every day and be efficient in the game.
What I appreciate about that, Rich, is I don't think there's a right answer here, right? The fact is that it prompts a conversation with this individual that I think you can go and ask that question, Rich. Slide this across to them and say, hey, Jairus, how you doing? Jairus is like, I'm doing fantastic. You're like, okay, I think that answers the question for me. Or he's like, you know what? I got to tell you, I don't feel like I've been part of the team for 6 months. And that response gives you all the context in the world as to how you have a conversation with him. Maybe to your point, right?
It's a conversation starter.
Yeah. Khaled, I see the finger on the chin there. I'm thinking that means there's some thoughts going through your head. Share.
So the moment I saw this profile, I said, this guy reminds me of Peter Parker when he found out he has superpowers. He's just like sharpening that saw. Look at his efficiency score. He's sharpening that saw. Great, excellent. Like Rich said, steady, good. Let's keep it that way because I think he's onto something. Second thing is his overall score is 47. The company role score is 49. He's not too far off. And then here on the left, we see somebody like Sarah F. with 88. So wherever he's at in that role, there's a lot of opportunity for him. Give him time. Maybe he needs to pair up with somebody who could give him some short-term goals to remind him that he's on track, keep him focused. I've seen this personality a lot in middle management in some startups. Great at what they do. They just give them time. They're coming up with something, and we need to trust and lean onto them because I see some good stuff for this person coming. I wouldn't say, let's promote him. Just give him time.
So I'm going to stop sharing for a little bit here because you've probably seen that screen for quite some time now. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to bring it back to the panel. I'd love to kind of get some of your thoughts, kind of maybe from the beginning of the conversation to the end here, what you've kind of taken away, sort of some key take-home messages for anybody who's been listening in. From the audience, I'd like to do that as well. I'd like to hear from you. What have you seen differently in that sort of, in finding your employees' true potential in that quest for a human life, which is the name of our topic? Do you feel like you've gotten some more visibility into how you can treat each individual in your organization potentially differently? If you do, I will tell you, we'll make an offer here that if anybody wants to see this for our organization, just type in empathy into the comments, and we'll reach out to you and actually build these graphs for you from real data for your organization, so you can do it as well, and you can do the same analysis and story analysis for yourself. But to the panel, we've got about 10 minutes left here before we run out of time. Give me a sense of what sort of from the beginning of the conversation to the end, what are the sort of the key take-home nuggets that you think everyone should maybe write down and go think about trying? Khaled, I'll start with you.
Okay. So whenever I give talks in organizations, one of the first things that I start with, and this is the subject of my coming book, a culture is like a cup of coffee. What you put in it defines its taste. All of us drink from the same cup. So we're all tasting this, whatever we're putting in it. So there's a responsibility on every individual in the organization to add something. We're all influencers of that flavor. The 3 profiles we saw here are 3 different flavors. And to bring out the best flavor profile, I believe we have to meet the person where they're at first. And that's the empathy piece. We need to align them with their organizational goals, any KPIs. And then we need to admit that there are some gaps that we can help them with. That's like as simple as I can give it to you in terms of parting words.
I appreciate that. Meet them where they are, I think is what I heard there. Dean, how about you?
One of the things that I often see, it's like that person who had the highest score, for example, may be their ideal pattern. That is that one individual. And you see that's an outlier who actually has the traits to kind of do it all. But a vast majority of people aren't going to have the traits to do it all. And oftentimes, what I try to get organizations to understand is it's not just the people who are in that role. What type of leaders do you have that can build the system and process to help them improve? And then what are other key team members, or what other kind of people you can add to the team that maybe would make up for some of their deficiencies? You see that, I see that in sales organizations like all the time. Where salespeople should be, their zone of genius is, out in front hunting, if it's a hunter type organization, utilizing their social skills. What are they terrible at? Details. And oftentimes the sales organization, they don't have the sales support specialists backing them up. They don't have the account managers who, are in the organization who support the hunters who like to stick and move. So then the hunters can then hand off the account to someone who's going to go deep and narrow and exploit and develop further business. It's the expectation that everyone's going to be able to do everything. So when I see these 3 type of individuals, my question is too, it's what other ingredients can you add to that team? What other type of support personnel can you surround them with to help each one of those individuals be really successful?
I talk internally about this idea of unlocking the superhero. Everyone's got a Superman or Superwoman suit underneath their shirt. A job of a leader is to help them open up the shirt so that the Superman symbol or the Superwoman symbol shows up underneath, right? Get that superhero to unlock. So Rich didn't purposely leave you to last, but I'm expecting some great nuggets from you.
You've got high expectations. What I'm hearing everybody talking about is what this all boils down to is culture. And I believe there's 3 things that build a strong culture. Number 1 is it comes from the leader itself, whoever's at the top of the organization, and it's their own self-awareness, and then building self-awareness throughout the rest of the organization with all the leaders. Number 2 is your communication. How well are you communicating with your team? And it's not just about talking to them, it's about listening to them. Communication is a 2-way street. It's not a 1-way street. When somebody says, hey, I got a communication plan, it's like, all right, where's listening in this? And then the last piece is, and I think the most important part that those other 2 build up to, is trust. How much trust do you have in your organization? And if you've got a high level of trust, you're going to start seeing people perform at levels you've never seen before. And that's what really, I think, unlocks their potential is when you trust your team.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Something I say is that there's kind of a pathway to success, and that is it starts with the recruiting, finding the right people to join into your organization, and then retaining them so that they feel that they're in a good place for themselves. And regardless, there's some context here, but for each one of these 3 people, we can see, do they fit perfectly or not? Do they want to fit? How can we make them fit? That leads to that productivity, because if they have if they feel like they fit, they're part of something, they can do something that they can be successful at, and they like it. Gosh, productivity just kind of comes along for the ride. You don't have to push; they'll do it by themselves. And guess what? If the productivity comes along and they enjoy their role, they're happy to get out of bed every day to come to work. The profitability you don't even have to look for it. It just shows up at your doorstep every single day as a mailbox check, right? I think that's what I'm hearing is, if you want to lead to that ultimate profitability and productivity for your company, lean into building this culture with understanding the true potential of each one of the individuals. Did I get that about right? Good.
It's good stuff.
Well, Well, I want to say thank you for all those who kind of chimed in. We had a lot of really good comments from Paul, Richard, Ebby, Jawad, Prim, I think Joshua, Fourth, Shuva. Thank you. I think I caught everyone there. Thank you so much for the interactive dialogue. I think it helped us shape the conversation. Hopefully you walk away from this with some good insights. If you'd like to participate in getting a free analysis like this for yourself, for your organization, just type empathy into the comments and I'll get you in touch with my team. They'll help you do that so you can take a look at these graphs. If you've got 50 people in your organization in a role, they can do that analysis for you and show you. So now you can see for your organization. That said, Dean, Khaled, Rich, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your insight, your experience. I think this was I'll mark this one as a success. This was a great session. Thank you so much for your time.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.